Okay, I'm starting now when Derek is ready.
Presented by the SDG Compact Fellows, Hannah Els from Cengage, Nikita Ladd from George Mason University, Derek M. Locke from Illinois State University, and Ratna L. Lubis from Telcom University.
The SDG Publishers Compact Fellows support the publishing industry in creating a sustainable future through action. We give practical tools and actionable guidance that are needed to prioritize SDGs in the research agenda and in educational materials while improving connections between practice and research. Our vision is a world where the world's publishers, researchers, educators, and practitioners collaborate effectively to achieve the SDGs. As SDG Publishers Compact Fellows, our team worked diligently over the past few months to create an industry standard tool in the form of a Sustainable Development Goals Rubric to evaluate submissions to the publishing industry. Why does this matter? We propose this provides enormous value to transforming research, governance, and education and beyond through the academic publishing industry. This ambitious collaboration speaks directly to SDG 4 Quality Education and SDG 17 Partnership for the Goals.
Rubrics help publishers identify the ways we can make our educational materials higher quality and more effective. To start off this video, I will discuss the Sustainable Development Goals Rubric, or SDGR. While the tool was designed for publishers, other educational stakeholders, such as educators, researchers, authors, school leadership, and students, can benefit from the process by completing the rubric and analyzing the results. The SDGR is a tool that can be used to evaluate coverage of the UN SDGs in textbooks and related materials. The goal of using the rubric is to identify areas that can be more inclusive of and better aligned with SDGs from the beginning of the revision process. The rubric itself is organized by the 17 SDGs. Within each of the 17 SDGs is the corresponding list of targets for the goal, keywords associated with the goal, and 4 major evaluation criteria. The criteria are directly tied to the indicators associated with each SDG. The 4 criteria are the same across all 17 SDGs and focus on key term usage, relevant and current scholarship, diverse examples of sustainable practices for individuals, groups, and regions, and finally, relevant examples that engage students. As the reviewer uses the rubric to evaluate one chapter in the textbook they are planning to revise, they will add evidence and a tentative improvement plan for each area of improvement they identify. The SDGR is designed to help identify areas for improvement in any textbook. While there may be more explicit opportunities to address SDGs in, say, an environmental science textbook, this rubric will help identify key opportunities to address SDGs in other textbooks as well, such as information technology or art. No matter the discipline, instructors and students gravitate toward educational resources that represent their needs and values, such as the need for a sustainable future. Finally, our group has created an action list that offers suggestions on how the SDG rubric can be used by various stakeholders. While the tool was designed for publishers, other educational stakeholders, such as educators, researchers, authors, school leadership, and students, can benefit from the process by completing the rubric and analyzing the results.
After Hannah used the Sustainable Development Goal Rubric as intended, we moved on to evaluate an already published academic article as a proof positive that this rubric can be used in different ways. We adapted the use to evaluate this academic paper, and we plan to move on to other textbooks and already published trade manuals in the future. As an example, we chose one of the most cited papers from 2020, an article by Brooks et al., The Psychological Impact of Quarantine and How to Reduce It, a rapid review of the evidence. Now, we went line by line through this paper and found many examples of textual evidence that can be organized into an SDG index. Now you'll see on the screen that this index looks much like any index at the end of any textbook or trade manual or academic paper, where you'd look and find what page information is on. However, this one is organized by the SDGs. So we use the rubric to organize by the SDGs, and you can see, scrolling through, all the different SDGs that were shown in this paper that is not about the SDGs. If widely adopted by 2025, every student and casual reader anywhere in the world ought to be able to pick up a freshly published article or book and flip to the back to find which phrases, tables, or words relate directly to the Sustainable Development Goal of their interest. As we enter the second year of the UN Decade of Action, publishers across the medium, including academic publishers, ought to include this new tool to meet our global need.
When we showcased the SDG rubric to several publishers, we realized that it could be used for a number of thought experiments and practical solutions, ranging from ways school leadership incorporates the education for sustainable development into their institutions, to how companies using artificial intelligence can help track the implementation of the SDGs. AI and the SDG rubric can be used in sync for indexing and extracting the concepts out of the content. Once that is done, it can be used to layer on an existing taxonomy and then provide data on the expected concepts. It can work with or without a taxonomy. This method can also help in building connections within the SDGs, as we all know how interconnected or interrelated they are. There are several existing tools that aid in finding content relevant to the SDGs. For example, the R Discovery Research Life, wherein you can search for a topic of interest and find its related chapters or articles. It uses UNSILO's machine learning based semantic concept extraction to identify the most relevant topics for each of the SDGs. The other tool is developed by Taylor and Francis, called the SDG Online. The SDG rubric can be used to validate their findings. Having looked at the different ways the SDG rubric can be used, we will now present a specific real-life example experienced by a very own team member, wherein she used it with her graduate students.
With the development of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Making Indonesia 4.0, the idea of sustainable development is the idea that collectively requires a certain conversation on how do we create a world for ourselves and our future generation to live in, which we are all empowered and engaging. In the context of Telkom University Indonesia, we are already working to strengthen our contribution to the conversation of the language of the SDGs. However, serious questions are being voiced as to what should be the focus for making sense of the 2030 Agenda. Since the COVID-19 pandemic has boosted connectivity, the specific role of digital technologies can contribute significantly to the fulfillment of education for sustainable development. Using a virtual classroom concept, me and my students are looking at SDG rubric action list to identify what is needed most urgently when it comes to learning the sustainability discourse. We take initiative to make changes for making the world a better place, as well as to understand the true nature of sustainable development, which will be the challenge of the future generation. In line with the philosophy of education, I place the 4 pillars of education UNESCO: learning to know, learning to do, learning to live together, learning to be, as the real-world outcomes in line with the 17 SDG. The SDG rubric action list opens students' mind to different communities and experiences outside of their own. The SDG rubric action list is the evaluation tool for higher ed students to identify the most important facts surrounding their neighborhood, to identify the key issues, to specify alternative courses of action, to evaluate each course of action, to recommend. This rubric in turn can stimulate and assess student learning and development in transdisciplinary sustainability projects in their local context.